Earlier this year, the Walt Disney Company released the live-action remake of The Little Mermaid starring Halle Bailey, pulled in about $570 million globally at the retail box office. That would have netted back somewhere around $280 million to Disney. But the question today is, how much did Disney actually spend to get that $280 million? That's the problem, and that's why it's considered a flop. But today, we have some updated numbers thanks to new filings in the United Kingdom on Sandcastle Pictures, the production entity responsible for creating The Little Mermaid under the Disney banner. Let's talk about it.
Renegade Online.
Well, folks, welcome back. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's good to see everybody out there once again. And if you are like one of the many folks watching this video, not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment and turn that little red subscribe button to gray. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today. And join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern right here on Valiant Renegade for the live show. How is it that a film released globally in theaters and some of the biggest PLF screens out there that would pull in nearly $570 million US be considered a flop? Well, it is simply when the studio spends far more to produce and market a film than it receives in receipts back from the box office. So going back to our breakdown chart on theatrical rentals across the globe, and we know this information thanks to publicly available financial filings from some of the largest theater chains that exists. Domestically, movie studios get back about 55% of the domestic total retail box office, 43% from the international side, not including China. And then China itself, they receive back about 25% of those grosses. If we go back to the retail box office chart here on the numbers, you can kind of see how that breakdown fits in. If you give it 55% on that 298, 43% on the 270, minus the 5 or 6 million that came from China, you give it 25% on that figure, you're going to come up with just about $280 million that the Walt Disney Company actually received back. Now, if they had only spent around $150 million or so in producing the film and another $100 million in marketing, Disney would be fine. They would have broken even at the box office, made a little bit of money, and moved on. But of course, this is a Disney production, and nothing is that cheap for Disney. And thanks once again to Forbes magazine, we have some updates here from Sandcastle Pictures, which is the production entity in the UK that housed all of the financial returns for The Little Mermaid. Disney sinks $300 million into over-budget Little Mermaid movie. Disney revealed the cost of making the live-action version of its classic cartoon, The Little Mermaid, swelled to nearly $300 million by the end of August last year, 8 months before the movie opened. The colossal cost blows its estimated budget out of the water. Variety magazine had forecast the movie had a, quote, $250 million production budget, and there's a good reason why it sailed past that. Now, the article goes into some detail, relevant detail, to be fair, that the production was, of course, hindered by a lot of the COVID-19 pandemic-era restrictions, additional costs that went into it, and certainly that is something that many movies and many movie studios had to contend with. But be that as it may, as I've stated before, The Little Mermaid is one of Disney's most popular intellectual properties of all time. Some of the biggest toy and merchandise sellers there ever was Ariel herself. This movie should have been a layup by all accounts. It has one of the most popular soundtracks of any film that Disney has ever done, and yet, well, Disney does what Disney often does these days, and they changed almost everything about the film, and it turned into a flop. But here's a copy of the actual latest return that Caroline Reed is referring to in her article for Sandcastle Pictures Limited. Statement of comprehensive income for the year ended 31st August 2022. In the prior reporting period back in 2021, which we have all of these returns, folks, you can see 152.89 million British pound sterling. Of course, this is in the UK, so we are talking about a foreign currency. We have some exchange rates to account for. And then this filing period that just came in within the last several weeks, 29.5 million British pounds sterling in addition to the 152. And prior to the 152 that was reported for the period that ended in August of 21, the period ended on 31st March 2020, 43 million British pound. And you can see the reporting periods had changed at that point. And then further back, 2020 repeated again in 2019, another 17 million pounds spent. All of this adds up to a US dollar equivalent over the course of those several financial reports to roughly 300 million. And in case you missed it, yes, again, that was through August 31st of last year, 2022, meaning that short of Disney having completely finished The Little Mermaid, including post-production, all of it, by the time that financial return was filed, well, you have to imagine they spent even more since then. And given Disney's panache for running over budget and doing tremendous reshoots and reordering post-production after the fact, we can pretty much expect that that total spend on production is going to get somewhere around the $350 million range once these latter tax returns come in the next several months to a year. Now, of note, the recent financial statements reveal that the total of $297 million had been spent on the movie by August 31, 2022, and then comes the cash reimbursement. This is the film tax credit, and this is the reason why many of these productions, as we state all the time, will choose to shoot in the UK, even though they might have a greater level of scrutiny because of these public financial filings that they have to contend with in order to get this lucrative film tax credit. And that film tax credit to date was almost $57 million. That film tax credit certainly helped soften the financial losses for the Walt Disney Company on The Little Mermaid, but of course it didn't eradicate them altogether. If you're talking about a movie where Disney is going to spend outright $350 million on, and then spend another $125+ million to market that $350 million production, now you're at $475, possibly approaching $500 million to both produce and market a film of this scale. Then we throw in the tax credit from the UK, right now currently standing at $60 million. Let's say that gets up to $65 to maybe $70 million by the next returns. That means the net cost to Disney is still going to be somewhere around $400 million or more, possibly up to $425. So if you've got $280 coming back in, you can see the issue here. We're still looking at a loss for the Walt Disney Company for The Little Mermaid of somewhere in the neighborhood of about $125 to $150 million. And like we've talked about before, that never should have happened. Not with The Little Mermaid. Not with one of the most popular pieces of intellectual property that they've ever had, with the most popular soundtrack of any animated film they've ever had, at least in terms of numbers of sales. Still to this day, 30 some odd years later, little kids are still singing this music at birthday parties. And that was without this live-action remake. A live-action remake that they added an additional 45 minutes of runtime to that didn't need to be in the film in the first place. What was the extra production cost for that? What was the extra production cost to add all of this new music from people like Lin-Manuel Miranda that didn't go over very well, or at least not much better than a lead balloon? And yes, Disney, virtue signaling does have its price, and that comes in the way of the box office. The Little Mermaid should have easily been a billion-dollar film. The Little Mermaid should have been competing head-to-head with Barbie this year. It should have been competing head-to-head with Super Mario Brothers. But you screwed it up yet again. And again, Wall Street and investors out there alike are going to have to start asking a lot more questions about Disney's cost control and decision-making, creative decision-making, when it comes to these films that they're putting into theaters and even some of the shows they're putting on Disney+. They are spending billions upon billions upon billions of dollars in flop after flop after flop, or at least mediocre performance after mediocre performance. And if Disney wants to keep heralding themselves as we're great storytellers, then they had better get out of the mediocrity very soon. The Walt Disney Company is simply running out of IPs that it controls to pillage and put back onto the screen. We know that they have a Snow White movie coming next year, or at least that's still the plan. Good luck with that. When you have stars like Rachel Zegler that can't keep their mouth shut and sink a film before it ever comes out, well, here you go. It's not going to probably look terribly different than what we saw with The Little Mermaid, but I actually expect Snow White to perform worse at the box office. Snow White's never been as big of a thing as The Little Mermaid has, at least not in the recent generations. So if you couldn't get The Little Mermaid over $600 million globally, I don't know what Disney's expecting with Snow White, but it's probably less than what they saw with The Little Mermaid. There needs to be some serious changes inside Disney because this simply cannot continue from a business perspective. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.